Kaya ʼusteeyí ayaki. Chaltakhatatawa adatyu aututla. Yayaki koa. Ke awakakshahit ya ach inye jine ya klingidir atangi kuti. Chaltakhat at hakade yanahin. Ye awe one qanins. Unay yati ayaha ḳusteeyí. Jan koa. Ja adusa awe ha'in. Wuchin tlein wuch ich gachdeshi. Yewe achin outletu kachwan ish. Tla yuchatangi awe kachkonach yake. Kwashkuk watu DGS. Aka awe kone ya ha yuchatangi dat yejigachtune. Kuksa au tadechana. Ya dua. Do you chatangi ʼaduwóosʼ ʼusteeyí kachwan ish. Hel iyach lingit ani ka. Nikdain da yikak ka nikdain kuda inek. Just tula.aan kakusachan kwa eteich tuyena u. Ya nalkwatli lingit ani. Akagede gachlagwatl. Kek ḳusteeyí ʼusteeyí. Gwalni kutsu kadek qagud. Ajowe jas kusachan. Tula.aan. Eteich tuyena u. Jawasa ye ikatini. Ya an tula.aan u. Gwalliide haskuchdeshi. So this is Kachwan Ish. We're going to look at his picture in a minute. And we're going to do something a little different, and then we're going to come back to the workbook and come back to, we'll probably come back to asking questions. Like, Ida and I were in a mild panic. Like, isn't it like midterms, like pretty soon? But anyways, so Kachwan Ish, his name was George Davis. He was Tlein. He grew up in ḳusteeyí, but his people are from Huna. But his father was from ḳusteeyí, so that's where his clan comes from, the Huna, ʼaduwóosʼ area. And he was magnificent, like just such a high-level speaker, so fun, so funny. We were talking before class started about a bunch of off-the-record type of language, which I'm fine sharing. There's all kinds of stuff that I share with folks. But sometimes we just need a moment to ourselves as well. And those of you who maybe are in the class and missed that first portion, I'm happy to go over it again because it's kind of fun stuff. But I would ask him some stuff like when people are learning and they want to use a language, you want to use it for everything, right? So if people talk about it, we gotta find ways to say it. And so, but these are challenging sort of things for us as we sort of start raising people. We want to live in the language. That means we want to do all the things that you talk about through the language. And that means we've got to sort of bring the language to all these places where it hasn't been in a long time. But the language has been here forever, so it's been everywhere. So anyways, his father's people are ʼaadé, and he's told me amazing stuff through his whole life. And sometimes people want to know how to say stuff. I'll be like, we got to take it to Kachwan Ish, because we need to get the verbs for a bunch of different things that weren't documented yet as far as some of us knew. And so he would tell us these things too, like you'd have some verbs that are documented, like aadé, which is used in stories when we have some stories where like someone goes and marries an animal and they can now transform between human and animal. That transformation from human to animal is aadé, right? So he would tell me this stuff. And he's the one who told me this phrase. We're doing a bunch of recording. I was putting all my stuff away, and then he said, this is what my mom used to say to me all the time. He just dropped this amazing thing. And I didn't have my gear out, so I just pushed record on my phone. I said, could you just say it one more time? And he did. And so I read it at the start, which was, it's ironic because we were, full disclosure, going over some insults and some things you could say to people on Tlingit, because sometimes people are mean. People are racist towards us a lot of times. There's a bunch of stuff that has happened to us. So sometimes you got to have some of the fully loaded words. But on the other side of that, he said, now this is what his mom would say, do not speak or act with ill will to the people of the world who are like yourself. Only love and kindness, put that in your hearts. The world is spinning around. It's going to roll up to the place where your life will be going out of control. Maybe illness too will come your way. That is why only love and kindness, put that in your heart. However your life gets out of control, maybe these people you have been kind with, maybe they will help you. You can listen to it. It's on YouTube if you want to listen to it. It's great. There's a lot of background noise and stuff, but it's fine. And so these are the two, well, okay, whoops. That one yet. So we're going to do these real quick, and we'll just do them once, and then I'll show you where they are so you can practice them. So we found this when our first baby was real little, so probably 11 years ago. We were walking through like a used kids store, you know, where you can resell like your kids' toys and clothes and stuff. And they had this little box. I was playing with my kid with it. She's learning how to speak, and I realized I didn't know how to say a bunch of these things. So I took it to these two, the masters, Shikshani and ḳusteeyí. Shikshani, was not ʼaduwóosʼ. She was Ishkitan. So she was Ishkitan from Tlein, but she grew up mostly in Douglas. It was Orange Shirt Day. She did go to a school called Mayflower School. She did get violently abused her very first day of school for speaking Tlingit. She told me when I was driving her home one day, said they tried to beat it out of me, tried to shame it out of me, tried to scare it out of me, but I never let go of my language. And she was an incredible speaker of Tlingit. Working with these two, they always had high expectations of what our language should be. They had high expectations of what we should be producing. And they were really fun. They were fun and funny. They would always check things with each other to see what the other one thought of it. So ask questions if you got them. We'll just probably do each card twice, then move along. And then when we're done, so I'll show you where these images are. I've got recordings of them, but some of them are cut off because we're laughing a lot during the thing, which is, I should just have the whole audio up at some point. Okay, here we go. ḳusteeyí. 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 Yadachun. 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 Shawakit. 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 Akukti. 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 Yet. 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 Yekuwaj. 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 Yekugank. 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 Yekuge. 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 Yadash. يدش
يدش
يدش هش ودش
هش ودش
ودش
هش ودش
هش ودش
هش ودش
قنيقوخ
قنيخوخ
قنيقوخ
قنيخوخ
قنيقوخ
قنيخوخ
ششيو إقوقق ششيو إقوقق ششيو إقوقق قهات هيدي شتن
خاat خيدي شوكان
قهات هيدي شتن
خيدي شوتان
قهات هيدي شتن
خيدي شوتان
قهات أت شدوتن
شدوتان
قهات أت شدوتن
خاat شدوتان
قهات أت شدوتن
خاat شدوتان
يجي 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 خانة
خانا
خانة
خانا
خانة
خانا
هينخ ينقخ
ينقخ
هينخ ينقخ
ينقخ
هينخ ينقخ
ينقخ
وستاق
وستاخ
وستاق
وستاخ
وستاق
وستاخ
ييس
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 كاكو
شاكو
كاكو
شاكو
كاكو
شاكو
شتكاتسكو
شاكاتسكو
شتكاتسكو
شاكاتسكو
شتكاتسكو
شاكاتسكو
يدكوتسكو
يدكواتسكو
يدكوتسكو
يدكواتسكو
يدكوتسكو
يدكواتسكو
قايدي
خايدي
قايدي
خايدي
قايدي
خايدي
خاشيشكو
خاشيش
خاشيشكو
خاشيش
خاشيشكو
خاشيش تا
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 تا كيوتزكيت
كيوتسكيت
كيوتزكيت
كيوتسكيت
كيوتزكيت
كيوتسكيت
أنقاو
أنكاو
أنقاو
أنكاو
أنقاو
أنكاو
أناشكيدي
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 كاودوساي
أدووساي
كاودوساي
أدووساي
كاودوساي
أدووساي
سيوات
سوات
سيوات
سوات
سيوات
سوات
ودتك
ودكلك
ودتك
ودكلك
ودتك
ودكلك
وخك وخك وخك
وخك
ودلتخ
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 وششلا
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 ونا
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 يتسين
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 تلين
Tlein
Tlein,
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 ʻaduwóosʼ,
ʻaduwóosʼ, ʻaduwóosʼ,
woodlinet,
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 wooshaqaq,
wooshkach,
wooshaqaq, wooshaqaq,
wooshkach,
hadayin,
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 hadakan,
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 ʻaduwóosʼ,
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 qayitzhitidaj naqataqin,
kayes hitidach nadakin,
qayitzhitidaj naqataqin,
kayes hitidach nadakatin,
qayitzhitidaj naqataqin,
kayes hitidach nadakatin,
zaitdiyi,
ʻaduwóosʼ,
zaitdiyi,
ʻaduwóosʼ,
zaitdiyi,
ʻaduwóosʼ,
zaitdaki kewdqat,
ʻaduwóosʼ, ʻaduwóosʼ,
zaitdaki kewdqat,
ʻaduwóosʼ,
zaitdaki kewdqat, qukshukathan,
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 qukteethan,
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 qukathan,
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 quktaqqathan,
Quktakathan,
quktaqqathan,
Quktakathan,
quktaqqathan.
Quktakathan.
Tasekukuqsa. Chayekukinkuyaq. Inkanaq kayash tayithan.
Nach kayesh tayethan,
Inkanaq kayash tayithan.
Kanach kayash tayethan,
Inkanaq kayash tayithan.
Kanach kayash tayethan,
Inkanaq kayash kinathan.
Kanach kayash kenathan,
Inkanaq kayash kinathan.
Kanach kayash kenathan,
Inkanaq kayash kinathan.
Kanach kayash kenathan,
Kajuha ya anaskuk.
Juhayan anashkuk,
Kajuha yak anaskuk.
Juhaya anaskuk,
Kajuha ya anaskuk.
Juhaya anaskuk,
Kajuha ya anaskhat.
Kajuhaya anasuk,
Kajuha ya anaskhat. Kajuha ya anaskhat.
Kajuhaya anaskut,
Kinde.
Ne,
Kinde.
Kinde,
Kinde.
Kinde,
The yinde.
Yinde,
The yinde.
Yinde,
The yinde.
Yinde,
Nach aadé.
Nach aadé,
Nach aadé.
Nach aadé,
Nach aadé.
Nach aadé,
Shinach aadé.
Nach aadé,
Shinach aadé.
Nach aadé,
Shinach aadé.
Nach aadé,
Yahweh.
Yahweh,
Yahweh.
Yahweh,
Yahweh.
Yahweh,
Kash Yahweh.
Es Yahweh,
Kash Yahweh.
ʻaduwóosʼ.
ḳusteeyí.
ʻaduwóosʼ.
Eugene Tuck Night Touch. Okay. Questions, thoughts. 60 cards in 60 seconds. Right? So. No question?
I have a question. There was one word, I think it meant little one, and you said ʼaduwóosʼ, I think. And I'm named after my grandma, and she calls me ʼaduwóosʼ with a G.
Okay.
Can you explain like how you know that? How it would make sense?
Yeah, sure. So there's a bunch of different, there's quite a few of these cards where there's multiple ways you could say these things. I just went with what their reaction was. I was like, okay, 292-year-olds said it. Go ahead, fight me. Because, but sometimes there's multiple ways to say things. But one of the things I do want to touch, okay, so like, here's how I think of these things. So let's say you've got ʼs'ík. What is that? ʼs'ík.
Black bear.
So if I said there's these 3 things I could say that are all slightly different, I think. ʼaduwóosʼ, ʼaduwóosʼ, ʼaduwóosʼ. ʼaduwóosʼ, ʼaduwóosʼ, ʼaduwóosʼ. Like, ʼaduwóosʼ, ʼaduwóosʼ. What do you think?
Cub, small bear, and big bear.
That's right. So for me, ʼaduwóosʼ, on the mama's milk. ʼaduwóosʼ, off the milk, still with mama. ʼaduwóosʼ, away from mama. For me, that's a good sort of measurement of how those terms work. They also work for sizes of things. If these are all kind of normal sized tables, if someone came in like, I got that little baby table, last one left, that would be unayáade. Then you could have ʼaduwóosʼ, you can have ʼaduwóosʼ. So what I propose is a preschool we call ʼscún. An elementary school we call ʼaduwóosʼ. A middle school we call ʼaduwóosʼ. A high school we call ʼscún. And a college we call Tlein. Then we can talk about them all in Tlingit. So coming back to ʼaduwóosʼ, it means an adolescent. That's what I think the word kind of means, is an adolescent. So you'll see them. Let me switch sources for a second. So we'll look up ʼaduwóosʼ. So the other thing that happens, there's a couple things that do happen with some of these terms. Is sometimes things get long and they start just kind of running together. And sometimes there just ends up being a bit of a shortcut with some of these things. And sometimes you have dialects in terms of like how people say them and why they might say them a little different. So I'm in the high tone. What am I doing? ʼaduwóosʼ. Guksa. So ʼaduwóosʼ is a child. You just want to say, hey, I saw a child over there. ʼaduwóosʼ. If you saw children, that's ʼaduwóosʼ. Which is a little interesting because they literally mean like something's adolescent and something's child. But that's how those terms work. And now let me find, here it is. No, not that one. Guksa. Okay, ʼaduwóosʼ. So you could say ʼaduwóosʼ, ʼaduwóosʼ, and ʼaduwóosʼ. But I do think sometimes because you have ʼaduwóosʼ, that sometimes there is this thing. And sometimes we're going to see these things in Tlingit where you have Yes, I can post all those slides. I've got them. Yes, I'll get back to that. Sometimes you have some things that just slide a little bit. And you'll see examples of this one, right? So like how could an underline, because a K, we're going to see this. A K and a G can go back and forth. In Tlingit, that's almost the same sound, right? It's going to switch. So you're going to have something like ʼaeek. If that was mine, which I don't have any, I don't want one, they're their own thing, we would say ʼaduwóosʼ, right? So it turns into a G. You can go the other way too. Like you'll see it in verbs. Something was a G sound and it turns into a K. Whole bunch of those pop up in verbs. All those future kukwa, that thing was a G at one point. But sometimes, and then other times you're going to have these things like a CH, but not really changing, but having like a different sort of thing. Like for example, here's an example. So you could say, these are two different but related things. Can anybody tell me what either of those are? Tıtlawooç, tıtlawooç. Kind of advanced state verbs.
Is it something to do with kindness?
There's tula.aan, so you are absolutely seeing that similar verb front. So in the prefix, it's the same. But tıtlawooç would be saying they have mental. Somebody type for me. I need a typist. Hurry. Okay. They have mental fortitude, right? They have strength of mind. Like this is like you're not gonna get, you're not gonna get them to budge. But what if you have what if you have just too much mental fortitude? What are you then?
Stubborn.
Stubborn.
Sometimes you're getting so you're gonna see this TL to CH thing, right? Let me show you another place. So if you had Duke and you had Tooch, what are those two words? What is that in English?
Black skin.
In black. But if Duke gets contracted and then the end of this word changes a little bit, you have Duktuk, strong man. Because the skin was always darkened by sleeping by the fire. So sometimes you're getting slide, so sometimes like sounds are changing and it's predictable. Sometimes sounds have like these kind of like minimal pairs. Like, yeah, there is this version, they are related. Here's another example. Everybody know this? Ooh, I better check this out. Hold on. Let me drag this over here so I can look at it. Okay, your cuts. What's your cuts? Covering a lot of new ground today. And it's okay if we haven't seen these. It is sharp. What is this?
Porcupine.
Porcupine. So right here, you have a noun that could go in front of a verb. What's a noun that has like ch in it?
A noun.
Yeah. Well, kasha. That one's got kasha though. A noun that starts with ch. Porcupines have them, and so do people.
Hair.
Hair. Sharp hair. That's what the name means, right? But you see kat and kach. There's some kind of slight little difference there. So there are other cases. So people from, well, let's see. What is kudas? Shirt, right? Let me check. Let's check on my tone. Okay. How do people in Yakutat say this word? The old people in Yakutat, they don't say it the same?
Dutch. Dutch.
Is it with a G?
It's with a G.
Yeah.
So this shows you
Hung in.
that sometimes this sound can just become, and I don't know why, but that's why you would have gutsku. But then some of this stuff, so there's a bit of stuff to tease out here because you have some things that's just, yeah, the language just works like this. This sound becomes this sound. These ones have pairs. This one will sometimes contract and do this other stuff. And then sometimes we just have dialect, and sometimes we have sliding. And so like sometimes we got to sort of keep track of this stuff because there are things that people say that come from Tlingit, but the sounds have changed and have been sort of, one example would be lots of people say, "Tsuye right, where it should be "Tsuye but it's probably coming from like "see ya later," something like it's probably coming from English sounds or the question mark all the time, right? Okay. Yeah, and so sometimes when people go from one place to another, they would hear them speaking Tlingit, but they would get, I don't think they ever had a real hard time, but sometimes they'd be like, whoa, could you say, what is that thing? Because sometimes you have a different word for the same thing. Like, what is this? It's the last thing I'll ask. Just keep asking.
Moccasin.
ʼaduwóosʼ, moccasins. And in Yakutat, anybody know? Long time ago, probably not anymore. ʼqusteeyí. So sometimes you have a different word for the same thing. Sometimes you have sounds that shift. Sometimes in predictable ways, but sometimes not. Usually in predictable ways. So that's what I would predict when you have gutsku in a name. But also when you get long words like yedekutsku would just be easier to say. Oh, what's that?
On that note, with away and awa, are they both acceptable pronunciations, or do they come from different places, or what's the story there?
Yeah, so words, especially suffixes, and there's quite a few different words, if they end in a vowel, kind of depends. Like some vowels, it's important that they stay the length they are. Like you can't change that, right? You can't, well, sometimes you can, okay. But a suffix, like we're gonna learn the possessive suffix, when we have to say day or awe, right? Sometimes that's gonna go long and it's not gonna change. And these are interesting things in Tlingit. Like if you say ach, so if you say hit, we're gonna learn these rules. But if you want to say my house, it changes a little bit, right? How does it sound? Ahiti, right? So there is a bit of a standardization question here, which is the way, and standardization means this is just how everybody does it, right? Like English has a whole bunch of, English is like I before E except after C, and the word weird because it doesn't apply, right? But for Tlingit, we have some things where like, let's just write it short, but then it could be long or short. We don't have a way to write that yet. I don't know if we need one. We just sort of say, if you got a vowel ending that's added, doesn't matter if it's long or short. Although when we write this short, if you listen to people say this, I don't think you're gonna actually hear people say ahiti. They're gonna say ahiti, which is two E's. But I don't know. So yeah, it could be awe, it could be away, and same with we and way. You'll see those go back and forth. But sometimes, like, so like when you say we, like if you're gonna say because these ones work for this and that, right? So for example, we got a guka here and a guka over there. I could say ya guka. I could say we guka. And how I say and actually spell, I don't think it really matters. You say ya guka, you say ya guka. It doesn't change the meaning whatsoever. But if I was going to say adu, it has to be long, high, short, low. Has to. Yadu. Yata. That one also has to be long and high. And the second one has to be long and low. So we haven't really figured out a way, and I don't think we need more complexity in how we write Tlingit. But what we do is as we go along and start teaching how the language works, we start talking about when the vowels can change or not. Because sometimes they go either way, and sometimes they have to be one way, and sometimes they have to change to a different way. It is all predictable almost all the time. When it's oh, is there any?
Yeah, one more, just somebody, I should see who it was, just raise your hand.
Oh.
Crystal?
Cheesh. And Kauke, what's up?
Oh, I was sorry, took a bite. I was wondering if people have heard people say yeah away, like away versus yeah away. Because I was trying to go back in my memory if I've heard people say it short like that. Because
Yeah.
I feel like I've only heard them say it when they're calling out to somebody who's speaking like away, you know, like, so I was just curious if people say yeah away.
Also, there's a we, right, which is combined. It's two things combined, right? So you have a plus we. So is a little tiny thing that sometimes puts focus onto things, right? So you can say things like we to start, and I think we're like saying like indeed. That's how we're sort of translating that one. If you name someone, you're going to put money on their forehead and say their name. So you'd say, Qajis Yudza'ach. But that part is not part of their name. But when you name someone, you do add that. So you're saying like, them indeed, them indeed. And in this case, you have and we. So it's like focus there. And sometimes when you pull these things apart, it doesn't always make sense what the individual pieces mean. But when you have a we, there are some things that you can put in front of it, right? So you could say a lot with a we just by pairing it with one other word. Can we think of any others? Stay away, sit there. Okay, so what is ye awe?
That's right. The way it is.
I would probably say that is how it is, or the way it is, maybe. Whatever. And then ayechaway, I would say that is correct. But I would also say there is not a big difference between that's how it is and that's correct. You are not saying different things if you said those, right? Like if you said those in English, someone said something, you said, that's the way it is. And that's correct. There is a slight difference, but not a big difference. And I just say that because some people got mad because I was trying to suggest that these two things kind of, and so sometimes when we talk about meaning as well, when you separate things and you look at just the individual components, sometimes you have to say, well, let's put this by other things, right? So if I said ye awe, chwasaku, and ayach chwasaku, those are not saying the same thing. So if I said ye awe chwasaku, that would translate as that is how I know it. So what I'm telling you is like, that's how I learned it, right? That's what I'm telling you. If I said I know it correctly. So now I'm validating what I just said. And that's a bigger statement. What about Deowe?
That's enough.
Stop it already.
And Hoochawe?
No more. All gone.
Mm-hmm. Could mean expired in some cases. Okay. So this awe, I think, ye awe. I don't know if I hear people say like ye away, but maybe day away. I think you, if you're, like if I say day away the second time, I say day away, day away. Like I do put, but I don't know if I'm just doing that as a second language learner. Seems like it happens. But there's this different thing, which is awe. What is that thing? When do you use it?
In response to somebody talking.
Is it like that or?
Well, it's like if someone's speaking publicly and they'll say, "Chi shachish hus kagwantan." Oh, what? That's what they do, right? That's what they do. So before we take a break, um, we're doing a lot today. Okay, so at ku'ik, that's what you do. So you say, "Oh, what?" That's an acknowledgement. You're saying, "Thank you for acknowledging us." I don't know. I guess it's a tough one to translate. But I did hear a story about someone who's, and not, there's only certain, it's kind of the higher up people who are in the clan leadership who say the we part. So you kind of got to know who you are, because like you might be kind of used to being the person, but then Auntie shows up who's bigger than you are as far as status goes. So when they call out your clan, you're like, and then she's, what, right?
What if you're the only one there, though?
You do it. Don't let it, because otherwise you're letting them go. You're letting their words just float out into the air, because they're probably looking right at you when they say it, right? But then if they don't say anything, I'm like, they're not even listening to me. Right? I mean, that's how it feels, being Tlingit, right? So, what? Just don't.
You have to know.
Oh, go ahead.
You have to know who's in the room, and if you're the only one.
Yep. Like it does take some of this analysis as far as the culture goes. But I did hear there was a guy who would go to Ku'ik. He's a little older. Ku'ik is very long. Sometimes they take a little nap. And if someone mentioned it, because you do it when they say your name too. Right? So they said the name of the clan, and he was the one. He was the high person. So his buddy next to him would just elbow him. Right? One day he was at church and fell asleep a little bit. And his wife kind of nudged him. He goes, That's what I heard. That's how I heard it. Okay. Take a break. Come back at 7 o'clock. We did a lot, so come back at 7 o'clock. Okay, gonna teach you on wukecha. Okay, we have a series of questions. We'll get to them. There's a verb, abandon. This is also divorce or fire from a job. Depends on how it's being used. There are probably other ways, but this is just, and somebody said we're celebrating divorces. So it is related to the verb to throw away trash. I'm not saying anything about anybody. I'm just saying, coming back to sounds and how they're related, we do have ich, feet. Right? These are three closely related things. Just a single sound changes what we're talking about. So, and then we got a question. We'll go to the next question, which I think was about. Oh, I had an answer for it too. Okay, what is ʼk'ih? Trash. What is tz'ih? It's like dust or lint, but it's not dust that's piled up, right? It's like just, it's also just kind of generally it's trash, but it's not like empty containers and a whole bunch of that. So like, I guess it'd be a difference between like garbage and just stuff that's like kind of on the floor, right? And then eat is to throw away or to abandon. So all of these concepts are sort of related. And then you also have to abandon someone, fire someone from a job, to get, you could say there's nine, if it's sort of an amicable thing, you could say woosh ʼaduwóosʼ. We left our marriage behind. So you could also say things like that.
Would you put that in it?
Yes.
Let's balance it out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then there was another question, which was, what was it about? Sorry. You said, I was starting to answer, but you said you couldn't hear.
Oh, I was wondering if the verb for making popcorn was the same as cooking, or if it was different.
It depends on how you're cooking the popcorn. So if you're cooking it in a pan, then
Mm-hmm.
it would be spook. You would end up with this, because, okay, cooking and fishing, there's a couple of these different things, like when we get into the verb dictionary, swimming, cooking, carrying things, where there are like a whole bunch of different ways to say it, because there are things in Tlingit that trigger the logic of categories. Like Tlingit is like this language, if you thought of it as a person who just loves to organize things. You're like, hey, could you just organize these tools? Like, thank you. Oh, I would love to organize these tools because these are hand tools and and it's like just like it's like an OCD type of language. It's like, I will be here organizing everything forever, right? So there are some things that just trigger these kind of categories: closing things, opening things, carrying things, swimming, fishing, and cooking. So if we go look under cook, we're going to end up looking under boil and other stuff. Boil, broil, fry, roast, steam. So you can just generally cook something. But if you use, so you see like cooking rice, how do you cook it? So ʼaadé would work for popcorn, I think. But then if you're cooking it over the fire, because it's one of those Jiffy Pop things, it says don't cook over a fire. It's like, you bring these camping, what are you talking about? So that would be this one, which would be ʼshatus. This is digging a pit to steam your salmon, wrapping it in skunk cabbage, and you bury it and you build fire on top of it. To cook something whole in its skin. To blanch, especially herring eggs. To partially cook something when it's freshly killed, like fish. And then to cook something over an open fire so that it gets like real crispy. Like I went to Tlein to teach at a culture camp there. And I got in, they said, you want some moose fat? It's right there on the fire. I was like, this is the greatest welcome of all time. Of course I want moose fat. So I would say yes, but we'll also look at fry. And I think frying would also be appropriate if you're cooking it with oil. If like hot fry with oil, then you get spook, right? So a ʼaduwóosʼ. So if you had it like in a pan with a little bit of oil in the bottom, that's how you make your popcorn. I think you're dealing with this. But I also think ʻaduwóosʼ is sort of the blanket. It could cover all kinds of things. Like you could just, if you're not sure how to say the verb, ʻaduwóosʼ would catch it.
Okay, ḵusteeyí.
Yan kauke?
Isn't there a way to say cook that also means to kill it?
Like cook it while it's alive, kind of?
No, I mean like I thought I learned one of the ways it's like to cook it or boil it. There was something that also meant to kill it.
Like when you cook crab?
There's like jak. Maybe
Or like when you it's like when you cook vegetables, you sort of it's not as fresh. Like parts of the nutrients go away, die. There's like I thought there was I learned that and I can't remember if it was to boil or if it was some kind of version of cooking.
Well, let's look up steam and maybe it'll pop up there. So you can boil things. Ausgeüt. It's a strict verb. This means boiled fish, Tlingit style, Northwest Coast people style. Because the word utchi comes from this verb. In utchi, you can't have rosemary and thyme. And there can't be a whole bunch of herbs floating around in there.
Ash.
Yeah, you're gonna ook it. You're gonna ook it. Which is fine. If that's what you want, chowder, have your chowder. I think utchi, you get fish, potatoes, onions, water, and maybe some salt and a grease of your choice. So I think you're looking at, not counting the water, you get 5 ingredients. From my perspective, you go more than that, I don't think you have utchi anymore. You can boil meats, you can boil berries, you could steam.
Would blanching be the same as like fondue? Because like, you know, like hot oil fondue.
I think it has to be water. But there might be something for, because they say ech katsakni. No, there's not even cooking in there.
And it said hot water or oil or.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. Okay. So you have steaming berries in a pit, steaming in the hot ground with water poured on, wrapped in skunk. So like, yeah, there's 100 things in here for cooking. So we'll have to just do a big cooking one, because then there's broil and roast, which we didn't even look up yet. Okay, that's a good question. Any other questions? Because we got to practice asking questions for a little while. Okay. Everybody say, ʼaduwóosʼ.
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 So my first teacher, who I will not name since we're being recorded, was really, really strict about not wanting to include question marks on anything that we should know the question because it has saw in it or has it already.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And that we shouldn't need to introduce the question mark as to think of grammar. And today she reminded me of this.
Okay.
And I thought it was very interesting to share because she was really strict about it.
Well, okay, yeah. I don't want to argue with anybody.
No, and I can see both ways, but her thing is that it just then encourages to already end on the high tone.
That is true. That top one is not a question. It's a statement.
Agreed.
So, I think it's, maybe we put it at the front. Or maybe we put it at the front, like in Spanish, that they have one on either side.
Upside down one.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Just something I wanted to share.
The Tugen.
lots of people have taken classes with her too.
Okay. Yeah, and like there's some things where like there's these different perspectives, but they're not like facing each other different. They're just like, yeah, I see that point. I see that point. But we do have to remember not to go, ʼaduwóosʼ? What does the top one say? ʼaduwóosʼ.
Oh, you're
Is it like how we feel good?
Yeah, like how wonderful we felt. Right? So you could, this usually it's like, ʼaduwóosʼ. Ya ḥusteeyí aya utusatini. How wonderful we felt when we saw their house screen. Right? So a lot of times it's tied to something else. You'll see it when you study the big speeches, they say this a lot. What's really fun is when you study speeches that were recorded in 1899, we still talk that way today. It's really cool. So we are going to start color coding verbs, and just so you know, the color scheme is going to change. Like the further you go, we start with saying, hey, let's just use these colors. And what I want to show you is start learning how to identify where's the verb root, and where's the verb phrase. Because those are kind of three different things, and sometimes they're all the same thing, right? But starting with the root, that's what you would look up to find this verb. Right? I want you to get really good at spotting the verb root, right? And like kids who are raised in Tlingit, they can do this. This is not something that's completely foreign to learning Tlingit. My kids were walking around with a friend of ours who was watching us and speak Tlingit with them. They know Tlingit. And she said, ʼaduwóosʼ, right? I'm hot, I'm sweaty, ʼaduwóosʼ. And my youngest daughter turned to her older sister and she said, what's sigh? Isolated the verb root, like a good Tlingit baby. And her older sister said, sweaty. I was like, that's a damn good interpretation of that, okay? So sometimes we're gonna look up that root so we can say, okay, I'm gonna learn how to spot the root. Then I'm gonna learn how to spot the verb, which is gonna be usually one word, sometimes two. Then you have the verb phrase, which is saying you cannot remove these words without completely changing that verb. That's what those three things are about. So here you got wasa, sits outside of the verb. Then you have ʼaadé. Can anybody think of a different wasa question? Wasa shti denuk. Okay, so let me put that one up here. Now someone else.
ʼaduwóosʼ.
Can somebody else interpret that for me? Wasa shti denuk.
Is that one, how are you physically, or was it emotionally?
Yeah, emotionally. How are you feeling? How are you feeling? How are your emotions? Okay. So as we look further into this, this is what the final color scheme is going to be. It's taken me years to settle on colors. I don't think I'm going to change them. I want to give a lot of credit to speakers of Mohawk and teachers of Mohawk that I know, teachers of Oneida and languages that are related to these languages on the East Coast, and then also Denaina, Joel Isaac, especially, as we sort of saw what people were doing, color coding their whole language, we said, we want to do this. So what I've done over the last couple of years is taken every major component of the verb and given its own color. That color will be consistent. As you go farther and farther along, you're going to start sort of saying, okay, this color is this thing, this color is this thing. Here's the list of things I could choose from. Some of them, it matters a little bit, like what it means. A lot of them, they're just like they have some sort of function. So it's less important like what it means. But if you want to sort of move that around in your mind, go ahead. But a bigger, more important part is how do they function And then the critical part is how do they interact with each other? Because they start to smush together. It's all shmushville. Shmushville. Okay? So we're going to have objects, classifiers, and then we're going to have, I'm going to say stem and root all the time. They're not quite the same thing. How so? Does anybody know? There's a bunch of questions here I'm asking to sort of see where we're at. And by the end of this year, you'll know all this stuff. You'll know it all. So when we say root, we're talking about the meaning. T is to be, right? This is Hamlet's favorite verb, to be, right? And we see uti, which is to not be. So that's what we're talking about when we say root. When we say stem, we're saying, is it going to be, which one of these is it going to be? T, T, T. Stem is all about that vowel. That vowel will change. It is predictable. You're going to learn how to predict it. Because it went from yati to uti. It changed when Hamlet said the second line. Thanks, Johnny Appleseed. Dasa. Dasa. What kind of question is that going to be? What question? Dasa ituwasagu. Dasa ituwasagu. So there's the gu is the root. Sigu is the verb. Ituwa is part of the verb phrase. If you take it off of there, you've just got happiness. Sigu is happiness. Sagu is joy. Atsagu is sex. There's your bonus round word, right? I learned that because I was saying something about something I wanted or liked. This elder, she's like, "What did you say?" The way she said it, I was like, "Oh no!" So then she said, "I think she said atsagu," and then she told me what it meant. So.
Is that like a happy thing?
Yeah, it's like something happy.
They just call it a happy thing.
Well, there's more to. It's like, okay, we found a whole bunch of these things, and we've been in the orbit of the poop world, so this gets us into this orbit of this other world. So you could say, so ut does a lot with these sort of phrases, right? So you could say utsagu, right? So utsagu. Okay, we're just gonna build.
You want us to repeat that?
This.
Atsagu. Let's practice it.
We'll keep Johnny Appleseed on here for crediting this. Okay, so we have atsagu, right? So this is one way. So what about this phrase? Eat yan uwa ha.
I am hot.
I am tired.
I'm
Hungry.
hungry. Hunger has arrived at me. We could also say eat yatawaha. Right? Sleep has arrived to me. We could also say eat shukhuaha. I suddenly have to pee. Eat hatsuaha. I suddenly have to vomit. And you could say hot, eat hatsuaha, and you could say eat atuaha. Yeah, right? Like something has arrived, right? So now, like some of this stuff is coded language. Every language does this type of stuff. There's a whole bunch of things that languages will code. Be like, I'm gonna go behind this tree, right? I'm telling you I'm going to the bathroom, but maybe it's a public space. We don't know
Going
each other.
outside.
Yeah, I'm going outside. There's a whole bunch of things that sort of drop kids off at the pool, right? There's a whole bunch of these things. And there are
What's the last one? Can you say the last one again?
which last one? Dropping kids off at the pool?
No. Aadé.
ʼaduwóosʼ.
What is it dropping kids out?
I'm gonna take a poop.
We're not talking about hot right now.
Yeah, so we've gone the other way, okay? So then, there is, so then there's a direct way to talk about. So you got ʼatsuk, and
So
then
I didn't hear what was said in the classroom. I don't know if I'm picking up the right thing that's being put down.
ʼaduwóosʼ is it has arrived, baby. So now it's time, right? So it's like that's, but it's also like an indirect way to say it. And this is the verb. That's the verb where you're doing the action. Woosh. So that would be, they are sexing them right now. Woosh.
So it's a verb.
It's a verb. And so if you look in the verb dictionary, you will not find a lot of this stuff. And so it is a bit sanitized, right? For whatever reason. Who knows? We weren't there. But you don't have pooping, peeing, sex. You don't have these things which are parts of language. There's a whole bunch of body parts that maybe weren't in the noun dictionary as well. And like we know them, right? But if you go into, I think, so here is the notes from Jeff Lear. This is all off our webpage, tlingitlanguage.com, Learning Tlingit, Intermediate Tlingit. This is called Verb Notes. We have a fully typed out version of these notes that were typed by Tlein quite a few summers ago. And we're getting an organized version of that coming out. But these are all organized by verb roots. So if we go to the X, XU, and then XUL, and we get a whoosh and ʼaduwóosʼ. Right, so that's the verb for the act. Very similar to, there's other verbs that are like this, where you have a way to talk around it, right? Like you could say, eat. They all, literally saying they all went away from it in a mass. But it means they all died off. Right? So similar to that, there's different ways you can talk about these things. And sometimes there's times to be direct, sometimes there's times to not. And I will say, I had a relative who didn't speak Tlingit to me very much. He said, the time I was on the beach messing around with this girl, I stopped because I was like, man, I got no business messing around with this girl. I should really stop. And he said, this raven's on a log, and it goes, hush, hush, hush. So he's like, all right, so it's like, got that verb in my brain now. And it's also zero conjugation, right? So as you build your sort of understanding of how Tlingit works as a language, you continue to build your vocabulary. I don't know how to say this thing. Okay, I learned how to say it. Then you get to a point where you say, you can look this up, and just by looking at this, ʼaduwóosʼ, I can now use this verb in any way I want to. And you will get to that point. There's a bunch of things that you got to sort of learn, and there's a bunch of rules behind it. But without those rules, if you looked at ʼaduwóosʼ, I don't think you'd know how to say what you could say, ʼiqwhoosh, as long as everybody's okay with it, everything's consensual and everybody wants to. But other verbs will work like that as well. So once you look it up, you'll say, I know how to use it in almost every way, because if you look at this one, which we call the imperfective, the happening right now, that is the one form that I think is not really predictable.
So does always, and like, is, okay, it's highly contextual, I know that. But like if someone's like ʼaduwóosʼ, it would mean like one sex. Or would you have to say ʼaduwóosʼ?
You might be able to say ʼaduwóosʼ. That's a good question. Because at doesn't always mean, it's only in certain situations. Because if you say, for example, someone was talking about their kid and they said ʼatwadana, where they should have said ʼaudana. Right? So ʼaudana would be they were drinking it. ʼatwadana, or sorry, ʼaudana, and like, okay, ʼaudana and ʼatwadana. So ʼaudana would be they were drinking it. ʼaudana, no, I'm getting tired. ʼaudana, they were drinking it. ʼatwadana, they were drinking alcohol. Right? So sometimes it does it changes the meaning for certain things. But then sometimes it doesn't, right? And so you just learn which verbs follow which patterns. Because you could say, ʼawacha, they ate it. ʼatwacha, they ate. But it doesn't imply anything. It's just saying, yeah, they already ate. They ʼatwacha, they already ate something. So sometimes it's just something. But then sometimes it's raised eyebrows something. And then sometimes it's shameful something. I don't know. Okay. Covered it all. Wait, there's something in the chat. Well, this word doesn't come up in bad words. It's not a bad word. It's just a function. It's a thing that people do. And
Well, the other thing, we could argue whether or not the other words are bad words, right? But
it just functions, right? But they do. You cannot, with colonialism, you always get puritanical guilt built into all kinds of stuff, right? So then, now, there's all kinds of things that we'll figure out though too. And it does affect, it affects things. Like, to be honest, there's been times where I've created resources and people ask me to take things out of it. Because there's body parts in there that maybe people get embarrassed about. But I'm like, well, then they'll just say it in English. Okay, whatever. So.
and then it will go away.
Right? So, okay, we will close with this. Okay. So sometimes I'll do these exercises where we all sit in a circle and we play this game. It's like, name this type of thing. Everybody's got to say something different. We can't say the same thing if it's already been said. Like birds, right? So we all go around, we got to name a bird. But if I say tzakwesh and someone says, oh, dewa-tuacha, we already heard it. So then I got to think of a different one. So we were doing this with body parts. It was intermediate Tlingit many years ago. And a student said, well, I didn't take beginning Tlingit, but I want to take Tlingit with you, so can I just jump into intermediate Tlingit? I was like, you can try it. And they were learning really fast, but they also didn't have like quite the vocabulary that everybody else did. So we're going around, we're doing body parts. And just the timing worked out really well, because body parts can have body parts. So the person next to them said, ʼaadé. And they said, ʼaadé sha. I was like, oh, smart. Fingertip. Finger head, right? So it goes around, the person says, achik, next to them. So they said, and that's upper arm. And they said, achik sha, shoulder. I was like, oh, smart again. And then I think the person next to him caught on to what they're doing. So when it came to their turn, they said very slowly and loudly, achlau, which is a penis. And so I was like, don't do it, let's stop this before. And it got very embarrassed. It was fun, as long as everybody's enjoying themselves, and I think there's a lot of stuff we could do. But I do recognize that some people do get really offended if we talk about this stuff, and there are people who won't translate stuff that has things like this. But coming back, like a lot of the stuff that we know, Jeff Lear did a lot of work with people to just ask these questions that probably some people, they probably didn't mind, but a lot of people who are working in the language might have. And it's not like you do this stuff everywhere all the time. But ḳusteeyí, there was a bunch of stuff that we need to learn how to say. And he was one of the ones who taught us how to say all those things. Okay. That note. What is today? Tuesday. Okay. No big announcement. There's no super class this week. We're doing it next Monday. Super Smash class for Indigenous Peoples Day.
The university is open.
Yeah, university. We don't close for. There's not very many things we close for, and we're trying to work on some of those too. But yeah, we'll be here. We're going to be doing Indigenous stuff though. What's more Indigenous than this than Indigenous Peoples Day?
Nothing, no, it's great. It's all the other people who have to go to like math class and stuff or like English 101.
Right. Well, there is going to be a day I think where every class will be charged with indigenizing themselves on that day at least.
Oh,
Okay. ʻusteeyí, Johan. Okay.
Goodness, cheers.
Ah.
Goodness, cheese.
Ah.
I'm sorry if you already mentioned this, but are we meeting tomorrow or is that next week? Like
It's-
on Wednesday?
We're meeting on Thursday this week, Monday next week.
Monday next week. That's what you were just saying. Okay, thanks. Goodness, cheese.
Class next week, yeah. Donna Keat.
So does that mean we don't have Tuesday class?
Maybe Thursday.
He'll post Monday.
We'll go Monday, Tuesday, but not have class on Thursday.
I'm sorry, you know that document.
Casey, what's up?
Yeah, sorry, I was just writing down the date so I didn't forget. I was wondering if I'd be able to stop by tomorrow at 1
Yes.
to discuss. And is that where's that at Whitehead?